On a quiet evening, the kind where even the wind seemed unsure about whether it should howl or breeze, the last thing anyone expected was Caitlin Clark to waltz into a Chicago diner. Known for her basketball prowess, Clark was not just any visitor. She was a figure people had come to admire, one who stood taller than her actual height in the minds of her fans. But on this night, she wasn't in a gym, wearing a jersey or surrounded by the thundering noise of a court. She was walking into a greasy diner, the kind where napkin dispensers stuck and the clinking of mugs was the only rhythm in the air. But before we proceed further, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe. Caitlin, a star athlete whose basketball talent has turned her into a national figure, doesn't announce her entrance. She just strides in, looking like she could be any other 20-something seeking breakfast after an early workout. But of course, she's not. To say she stands out would be an understatement. Wearing casual clothes, perhaps a hoodie with a logo peeking out from beneath her jacket, her height alone draws immediate attention. At 6'0", she towers above most of the patrons, and her athletic frame signals that this is no ordinary customer. People recognize her, though some take a moment to place the face with the TV star who has dazzled fans with her game-winning shots and record-breaking performances. The hostess blinks twice, almost like she's trying to adjust her vision. She knows the face, and yet she's not sure if her brain is playing tricks on her. Caitlin Clark, here, in this diner, it feels like the kind of moment you'd only see in one of those cheesy sports commercials where the superstar stops by the local joint to stay grounded. Without making a fuss, Caitlin casually waves off the suggestion of a booth and slides into a stool at the counter. She folds herself into the space, not quite fitting, and the waitress hands her a menu without asking questions. Caitlin flips through the laminated pages like anyone else, but it's clear from the sideways glances around her that the other customers are no longer focusing on their meals. The conversations begin in hushed tones. People nudge each other, whispering, "Is that her? No way, it can't be." Phones come out, held slightly lower than normal, capturing sneaky photos that will no doubt hit social media by the end of the meal. One brave customer leans toward his friend, mouth agape, clearly having realized just who walked in. His friend, nonchalant, takes a bite of his pancake, eyes fixed on the star as if seeing her in person makes her less of a myth. Caitlin doesn't seem to mind the attention, or maybe she's just used to it. After all, she's been in the spotlight since her high school days, growing into a force of nature on the basketball court, someone who can turn a game upside down with a single shot from beyond the arc. She's the type of player who turns heads, whether in an arena packed with thousands or a diner holding a crowd of 20. Her presence, though unexpected, doesn't shift the vibe of the place entirely. This isn't a glossy PR stunt. It's just Caitlin grabbing breakfast like anyone else. She orders coffee, probably black, without much fanfare. The waitress, still slightly starstruck, writes down her order with the kind of precision you'd expect if she were taking notes on quantum physics. Everyone watches Caitlin sip her coffee as if the cup itself might gain superpowers from her touch. The clatter of plates and silverware slows for a moment, the usual diner chaos taking a brief pause. But what's most striking is that Caitlin doesn't act like someone special. Her posture is relaxed, her demeanor almost disarming in its normalcy. She exchanges a few words with the waitress about the weather, maybe makes a joke about the cold wind that never really leaves Chicago, even in spring. It's a reminder that athletes, no matter how extraordinary, still appreciate the simple things: a hot coffee, a good meal, and a moment of quiet before the next big challenge. Then, without warning, something happens that shifts the energy in the room again. This time in a way nobody expects. A man sitting at the far end of the counter, looking every bit like a regular in his worn Cubs hat and flannel jacket, glances over at Caitlin and leans in a little closer. He clears his throat, probably louder than he intended. There's an awkward pause, and you can almost see the gears turning in his head as he tries to figure out the best way to approach her. Hetty starts, voice gravelly but good-natured. "Ain't you that basketball player? Clark, right?" Caitlin turns her head, smiles politely. "Yeah, that's me," she says, her voice casual, like she's answering the most mundane question in the world. The man grins, leaning back in his chair, clearly pleased with himself for making the connection. "You're something else on the court, you know that. My granddaughter's a big fan. Plays ball, too. Not as good as you, though," he adds with a chuckle, eyes twinkling. Caitlin chuckles along with him, thanking him for the compliment. "She's probably better than you think," Caitlin says, with the kind of modesty that makes her seem approachable. She doesn't inflate her ego, doesn't take the bait to gloat. It's just a simple conversation between two people who love the game. The man's grin grows even wider. his face lighting up like he's just had a personal moment with a legend. The interaction would have ended there, but it's a diner, and nothing happens in isolation. Soon, more people start chiming in. A woman at the booth nearby leans over, tapping her spoon against her cup like it's the dinner bell. "My nephew's obsessed with your games. He's got your jersey and everything. You think I could get a quick picture to send him?" Her voice is hopeful but cautious, as if asking too much might break the spell of the moment. Caitlin nods, not missing a beat. "Sure," she says, shifting in her seat to pose for the inevitable flurry of photos that follow. Phones come out again, but this time with permission. The diner, once focused on the act of eating, turns into an impromptu meet and greet, and suddenly, it's like everyone is in on the same experience. There's no pushing, no crowding, just a respectful ripple of excitement passing through the room like electricity. One by one, people approach her with small requests, an autograph, a quick selfie, or just a handshake. And Caitlin, with the same patience she displays on the court, handles each one with ease. She doesn't rush, doesn't appear burdened by the attention. Instead, she engages with everyone, even the shy kid hiding behind his father's leg, coaxing him out with a soft smile and a few kind words. It's the same charm that's helped her win over audiences far beyond basketball, making her a rare kind of star, someone who's larger than life, but doesn't act like it. The diner, for all its simplicity, becomes the backdrop for a moment that feels almost cinematic. It's as if the patrons have all stumbled into some alternate universe, where sports heroes casually stop by for breakfast. And in a way they have. For a brief time, this everyday space is transformed by Caitlin's presence, not because she intended to make a scene, but because she couldn't help it. She's magnetic that way. There's humor in the way the regulars, people who likely don't keep up with college basketball, respond to her presence. One guy, clearly oblivious to her fame, asks her, mid-conversation, if she's any good. Caitlin, with a grin that suggests she's heard this one before, plays along. "I try," she says, understated as ever. The regular nods approvingly, clearly impressed by her humility, though he has no idea he's talking to one of the most celebrated athletes in the country. And then there's the guy who confidently offers her unsolicited advice on her game. "You gotta shoot more threes, you know? That's where the game's going." Caitlin, ever polite, listens with a straight face, nodding as if she hasn't been draining threes from the parking lot since high school. It's this combination of humility and humor that makes the whole scene feel surreal yet grounded at the same time. As the morning rolls on, the rush of patrons ebbs and flows, but Caitlin stays a little longer than anyone would expect. She finishes her breakfast, maybe a plate of scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit, nothing too heavy, and waves off the idea of a special tab. She's just another customer after all, and insists on paying her bill like anyone else. The waitress tries to protest, but Caitlin's having none of it. She pulls out her wallet, leaves a generous tip, and thanks the staff for their service, the kind of gesture that doesn't go unnoticed. The quiet departure is fitting. Caitlin Clark doesn't need to make a grand exit to leave a lasting impression. As she walks out, the bell above the door rings softly, and the patrons left behind are already texting their friends about what just happened. Some are still in disbelief, replaying the scene in their heads as they return to their meals, shaking their heads and smiling. The diner slowly returns to its usual rhythm, but the buzz lingers in the air. People will talk about this for days, maybe even weeks. As Caitlin Clark's silhouette disappears through the diner door, the small world inside seems to breathe again, like a windless prairie suddenly swept by a brief gust of air, now left still in its aftermath. Those remaining inside the small Chicago diner seem to be grappling with an odd mixture of disbelief and excitement. It's not every day you share the same space with a sports icon, and the energy of the moment lingers like the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Even though Caitlin is gone, her presence remains, etched into the memory of everyone who witnessed the peculiar, ordinary, and yet extraordinary event. The first person to break the lingering silence is the waitress, wiping her hands on her apron and muttering under her breath, "I can't believe that just happened." Her expression is halfway between awe and amusement, the kind that comes when you witness something remarkable, but still haven't fully processed it. She stands at the counter, looking down at the generous tip Caitlin left, a $20 bill folded neatly beside the empty plate. It's a small gesture, but somehow it feels monumental. In a way, it's the final punctuation mark in an otherwise unexpected encounter. The regulars, too, can't quite seem to settle back into their routines. The man in the Cubs hat, who had struck up that casual conversation with Caitlin about basketball, leans back in his chair, now fully realizing the magnitude of the exchange. He was talking to Caitlin Clark, the Caitlin Clark. His mind flickers with the realization, and he starts replaying the conversation over in his head, wondering if he said something dumb or if he came off like an awkward fanboy. But there's no embarrassment in it, just the soft glow of having shared a moment with someone great, and not in a stadium or on TV, but right there, over a cup of diner coffee. By now the buzz has spread beyond the diner, so the patrons, quick to whip out their phones, have already posted their photos and brief interactions on social media. Comments pour in, with people expressing disbelief, jealousy, and curiosity. "No way you actually met Caitlin Clark at that diner?" Reads one comment under a photo. "I was just there last week," writes another. In real time, the diner, previously known only to locals, is becoming a minor celebrity in its own right. And yet, for those inside, there's still something quietly personal about the whole experience. Yes, Caitlin is a star. Yes, she's recognized everywhere. But her presence in that diner, a simple act of walking in, sitting down, ordering breakfast, and making small talk, feels more significant than any game-winning buzzer beater. She made these strangers feel like they weren't just in the presence of greatness, but like they were a part of it, even if just for a fleeting moment. The boy from earlier, the one hiding behind his father's leg before Caitlin coaxed him out for a picture, is now proudly showing the image to the other patrons. He can't stop grinning, and his father ruffles his hair, both of them seemingly in a daze. For the boy, this is a memory that will shape his childhood, a brush with fame that will be retold at school, on the playground, and during family gatherings. Years from now, they'll be telling the story to his own kids, maybe embellishing some details for dramatic effect, but the core will remain the same. He met Caitlin Clark, and she was as kind in person as she was fierce on the court. As the initial buzz of excitement wears off, conversation begins to resume among the other customers, but it's clear that the normal rhythm of the diner has been altered. Instead of the usual morning chit-chat about weather, work, and errands, the topic is now Caitlin Clark, her impact, her skill, and the sheer randomness of her showing up in a neighborhood diner. People swap their own stories about her, where they first heard of her, their favorite moments from her games, and predictions for her future. But for some, especially those not as familiar with college basketball, there's still a level of awe that extends beyond just sports. One man, maybe in his 40s, with a salt and pepper beard and the look of someone who spends his weekends fishing rather than watching basketball, leans across the counter to speak to the waitress who served Caitlin. "I'll tell you," he says, shaking his head slowly, "there's something about people like her. You can feel it. Even if you don't follow sports much, you can feel it when someone's got that. What do they call it? Aura? Like they're just built differently." The waitress nods, still processing the surrealness of it all. "Yeah, I didn't even know what to say to her," she admits. "I just kept thinking, don't mess up, like she was grading my performance or something." The man chuckles. "I doubt she was grading you. Seemed like she was just here for the food, same as us." But even though Caitlin came for breakfast, her presence brought something more, something intangible yet undeniable. The mere fact that she walked through the door, sat at the counter, and shared a few words with those around her had shifted the atmosphere in a way that nobody could quite put into words. It wasn't just about her fame or her talent, though those were certainly part of it. It was the way she fit into the moments so effortlessly, like she belonged there, like she wasn't above anyone but right there alongside them. Outside the diner, the world spins on as usual. Cars whiz past on the street, pedestrians bustle down the sidewalks, and the skyscrapers of Chicago loom in the distance, indifferent to the small but impactful event that just unfolded in the diner. But for those who were there, life feels just a little bit different now, a little bit brighter. And it's not because they met someone famous, but because they got to experience something rare, a moment of connection that transcended the barriers of fame, talent, and everyday life. Back inside, the conversations about Caitlin Clark continue, each patron reflecting on what it was like to witness such an unanticipated encounter. They're no longer strangers. This experience has bonded them, if only for the morning. It's as if Caitlin's presence has transformed the diner into a temporary community, one where people can talk freely, laugh, and share stories about an unexpected brush with greatness. The man in the Cubs hat, still basking in the glow of his brief chat with Caitlin, looks across the counter at the boy who took the picture. "You know," he says, nodding toward the kid, "you're gonna have a pretty good story for your friends, huh?" The boy grins, clutching his phone tightly. "Yeah, they're not gonna believe it." "They'll believe it when you show them that picture," the man replies with a wink. And so it goes. The day moves forward, and gradually the diner begins to settle back into its usual rhythm. The rush of patrons begins to thin as breakfast winds down, and the staff return to their routines. Though with a little more spring in their step, still buoyed by the excitement of having Caitlin Clark sit among them. Hours later, as the lunch crowd begins to trickle in, the regulars who had been there in the morning start to leave, but not before sharing their stories with anyone who will listen. Word spreads quickly around the neighborhood, and by afternoon the diner's sudden fame has already become a talking point in coffee shops, barber shops, and office lunchrooms nearby. Did you hear Caitlin Clark was at that diner on 3rd Street this morning? Someone asks while waiting for their coffee. Yeah, she just walked in like it was nothing. And indeed, that's what made it so special. Caitlin walking in like it was nothing. No cameras, no entourage, no scripted interaction. Just a woman, an athlete, grabbing breakfast in a diner. It's the kind of story that would be hard to believe if not for the dozens of people who were there to witness it. One of the waitresses, who had been serving that morning, still riding the wave of excitement from Caitlin's visit, starts thinking about how the day unfolded. There was something oddly poetic about the whole thing, she reflects. Caitlin Clark, this towering figure in the sports world, came into their little diner and didn't act like someone who needed to prove anything. She didn't make a big deal out of herself, didn't ask for special treatment, didn't expect anyone to cater to her fame. She just existed in that space, a brief visitor in a world that was otherwise so far removed from the stadiums and arenas she's used to. By mid-afternoon, a local reporter catches wind of the story and shows up the diner, hoping to snag a quote or two from those who were there. He pulls up a stool at the counter and orders a coffee, looking around as if trying to spot any lingering signs of Caitlin's presence. The waitress, now slightly more composed after the initial shock, takes his order with a smile. She knows exactly what he's going to ask, but she lets him go through the motions. So, the reporter begins, I heard Caitlin Clark was here this morning. The waitress nods, pouring his coffee. Yep, she was here. What was that like? She pauses for a second, thinking about how to sum it up in a way that captures the magic of the moment, but doesn't get too caught up in the hype. It was different, she finally says, shrugging. I mean, she's just a person, right? But you could tell she's something special. The waitress's words hung in the air for a moment, like she was still digesting the experience herself. The reporter, sensing something deeper, leans in, waiting for more. She glances down at the counter, her fingers tracing the smooth surface as she continues. It wasn't about her being famous. It was the way she was just here, like she didn't expect anything from anyone. You know how some people carry this, I don't know, weight with them? Like they're constantly aware of how others see them. She didn't have that. She was relaxed. It was almost like she came in and let us into her world without even trying. The reporter scribbles something down, probably trying to capture the essence of what she's saying. But it's not something easily conveyed on paper. What made Caitlin's visit special wasn't just that she was a star athlete, but how she carried herself with such a natural ease. She became part of the space, like she belonged there all along, and that was what made the encounter so memorable. As the conversation between the waitress and the reporter winds down, a couple of late lunch customers trickle in, taking their seats at a booth near the window. They order sandwiches and iced tea, completely unaware of the quiet storm that had passed through the diner earlier that morning. The waitress goes to take their orders, the day moving forward, life resuming its normal pace. But for those who had been there, the memory of Caitlin's visit lingers, a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary moments come without warning or fanfare. They come quietly, wrapped in the guise of something as simple as breakfast, shared smiles, and brief exchanges of kindness. And just like that, Caitlin Clark had passed through their lives, leaving behind a story they'd carry with them for a long time to come. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more engaging content. We thrive on your feedback, so be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section below. Until next time, keep discovering and stay tuned.